Bosworth, who until recently was the dean of the Fletcher School at Tufts, has been our ambassador to South Korea, was Secretary Clinton's special envoy to Korea, and is now at the Belfer Center, just around the corner at the Kennedy School. Steve, some thoughts and comments of what you've heard so far?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very interesting discussion, and I commend you and others for drawing together such an impressive group of people who actually know something about East Asia. Just a couple of observations. First, for me, I think the central question over the next generation and beyond is how are China and the U.S. going to be able to work out a long-term relationship in which we can live with one another and live within the region. We're really talking about what is the regional order going to look like as it evolves over the next 10, 20 years. Our difficulty there, of course, is that we start from very different assumptions, we and the Chinese. For the Chinese, the last 150 years was a brief interruption in the normal process of the power within East Asia. For us as a nation, we've not really dealt with China as a strong power until just recently. So we each have somewhat distorted perceptions of the other, and we're going to have to work those out over time. It's not going to happen quickly. So I think many of the issues that we're going to be talking about over the next few months are, at bottom, issues of how the U.S. and how China relate to one another, how we are able to provide an atmosphere of political tranquility within which the economic progress, which is already underway in East Asia, can continue. I would hope that we can both put more emphasis than we have before, perhaps, on the trade and investment aspects of our regional relationship. I think that the TPP, as it's known, is one of the key ingredients for long-term stability in East Asia and for advancing our interests and the interests of other countries in the region.
And TPP means what?
Trans-Pacific Partnership. Excuse my use of crippling acronym. It's not really Trans-Pacific in a full sense, and it's not really a partnership, but it's what we're trying to build. And I would hope that we could put in place in the relatively near future a Trans-Pacific Partnership which includes China. At the moment, China is not actively involved in the definition and design of this. But I think over time there will have to be, or the structure will be absolutely meaningless. And as we try to build regional infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, some of which the Deputy Assistant Secretary was outlining earlier, all of which I think is very important. But I would urge that we not lose sight of the fundamental importance of continued economic cooperation and integration. And in fact, the markets of East Asia are already, if you look at it in terms of percentages, more highly integrated one with the other than our market. Striking. But that's because the private sectors in those countries have seen it to be in their interest to build these private production networks throughout the region. That's a fundamental feature of the emerging East Asian infrastructure. So we do have a few other problems we're going to have to be concerned about, one of which, of course, is North Korea. And we'd have to devote a whole evening to that discussion. But I think here, too, this is, in the end, this is a very important test of the ability of the U.S. and China to work together. Our interests fundamentally are quite similar, and our approaches should be very different. I think we could each learn a bit from the other, deciding how best to fix the fundamental problem that North Korea poses. North Korea is not going to collapse, at least we can't count on that. It's no longer a reasonable premise for American foreign policy. And North Korea is not going to suddenly decide that it really doesn't want nuclear weapons. I don't think that's a very realistic proposition. But we've not been able to come up with a rationale or reasonable example. It's a very, very difficult country. But remember, North Korea is right at the heart, geographically, of this entire region, which is the most vibrant, vigorous economic region of the world. And North Korea is right there at the heart, and essentially it's a failed state. And its capacity to cause damage and instability throughout the region should not be underestimated. Thank you.
Steve, let me ask you one other question. Recently, the Chinese president visited South Korea.
Yes.
Rather interesting development, it seems to me, especially given the relationship between China and North Korea. What do you make of that? Inspired?
Can you make a comment on?
I'm not surprised by it. China made its strategic decision in 1992 and decided to recognize South Korea and build a relationship with them. China is now South Korea's most important trading partner. And North Korea does not really even have statistical significance in North Korea or China's view of global, of regional trade. But neither should we hope to convince China that its interests are best served by witnessing the collapse of North Korea, which is, in a sense, sort of an unspoken objective, has been for 25 years of U.S. policy toward. So I'm not at all surprised that China and Xi Jinping went to Seoul. I think that's a strong signal of the South Koreans that his view of China's long-term interests is the same as that of his predecessors. But they're not going to suddenly abandon North Korea, and we can't expect that they will.
Thank you.
Can I